And welcome back to another episode of Ask Eddie and Ann. Ann, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm here. It's been a very strange week, and I'm just happy to be here. I'm extremely cold, as people can probably gather from the attire this evening. I don't know what the deal is, but it's very, very cold in my house. I was out today, and I have not warmed up. I'm just freezing. So
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
I'll live, not to worry. But you look very cozy.
Yeah, that's because the radiators are on now. When the radiators aren't on, this place is ice cold.
Okay, well, I'm gonna come over there. Maybe we should have done this one together because I'm like freezing. I'm gonna guess that is. Well, I know that's Emily and not
Yes.
Charlotte because you already informed me of that. So I was going to try to
Yes.
be cute and say, "I'll bet that's Emily," and because I can tell them apart, but no, I can't. So this is my warm up here. So
Yeah, Charlotte, I don't know. Emily must have locked her in the closet and decided to take her place.
okay, very good. We'll see if she's as entertaining as Charlotte. Okay, let's dive right in and get to some of these questions. I really have not had much of an opportunity to review them, but we're ready to rock and roll.
Okay, so our first one is from Greg. Hi, Eddie. Will you be returning to the Redford Theater in Detroit?
I hope so, if they'll have me. If John Monahan, the fellow who puts on those shows at the Redford, usually that has been in September, pre-pandemic. We've done a Noir City in Detroit. So I'm hoping that will happen again, but I have not spoken with John lately, so I don't know what the plans are, but they certainly have, it's in play. So I hope we see you in Detroit, Greg.
Yeah, and I just wanted to let people know if you're coming into town for the NOIR City in January in Oakland, we're happy because we actually have a promotion with the hotel there for hotel rooms, just so you know.
Yes, the Marriott at the city center has agreed to a special Noir City rate for people who are coming to town for the festival. So that information's on the website, right?
Yeah, you go to noircity.com and you go to the venue page, and also on there is directions for people to how to get to theater from different locations if you come from Oakland or somewhere else in the area. So all on the venue page.
I would suggest taking a lift or something like that from that hotel is in a fine location, but it's you kind of got to get around Lake Merritt and over to the theater. So it's like a 8-minute ride, 8-minute drive or so from the hotel to the venue. So it's not so bad. But that's what I would suggest doing. Also, I have to say, ticket sales have been very good. It's not even, well, this will air close to the end of the year, but at the time we're actually recording this, we have not sold this many passports this early ever before. So given that the venue has fewer seats than the Castro had, if you are thinking of attending, I would strongly recommend buying a passport or getting advance tickets for the days and the films you want to see early, because that could be an issue. And I also just want to add very quickly, because I've had a couple of people write me directly asking about stuff because they're thinking of coming in, and because of the situation with the vaccinations, or we will be checking, and you will need to wear masks, and we are saying that the auditorium's capacity is about 650, and that is the full capacity. So that is not a socially distanced capacity. right? I mean, if there are 650 people in the theater, they will be in every seat.
Yeah.
So just that's for people to just bear in mind, because people have asked about that. And they've asked about the ventilation. The ventilation is perfectly fine. So, you know, and also one other little tidbit is it's the big theater, but there are other screens in the house at the Grand Lake. And so there will be other movies showing at the same time that we're presenting Noir City in much smaller venues off to the side. But I don't know why people were asking about that, but that is the case. Though there are other venues that will be operating at the same time. But we've got plans to keep everything nice and orderly, so it's not anything to be that concerned about.
You want to read question 2?
Okay, I have question 2 here in front of me. This is from Doug in Silver Spring, Maryland. Doug is a veteran of the show. He asked a lot of questions. And this one he's asking in honor of the recent passing of Stephen Sondheim. And it's about the 1973 movie The Last of Sheila, which Sondheim co-wrote with Tony Perkins. He says, I personally place The Last of Sheila with such quote unquote sophisticated noirs as Laura the Unsuspected and Rope. How do you two feel? Is The Last of Sheila noir or not? And do you have an opinion in that regard?
I mean, I would consider it noir. You know, but I think that comparison to Laura is really apt, because that's what it reminds me, or the one with Rosalind Russell where she's an actress.
The Velvet Touch.
The Velvet Touch. I mean, reminds me kind of those where you know, and the reason why they wrote that screenplay is they used to put on actual mystery games with their friends and stuff, and that's sort of just a tidbit, because I'm a big Stephen Sondheim fan.
Right, I remember. I'm old enough to remember when that film came out and reading all the backstory of it, and I do not really consider it to be a film noir. To me, it's more a whodunit, and it's almost a whenever there's a big cast of suspects in a confined space, I tend to not think of it so much as a noir, but more as a whodunit. It's certainly a nasty film, and we have Rosemarie Keenan wrote a wonderful essay in the Noir City magazine about that film, which she loves. Stating her case for why she considered it. It was in our noir or not section, and she stated a really great case for why it could be considered a film noir. But I'm just saying that personally, I sort of don't consider it that, because it's just structurally and everything, it just doesn't work for me. Like Laura, to me, Laura, Mark McPherson is the protagonist, and the idea of a guy falling in love with a dead woman is kind of noirish. And in The Unsuspected, although it feels sort of that way, I mean, from the beginning that Claude Rains, sorry if I'm spoiling. Oh, I can't spoil it. Everybody knows. It's not a secret. Yeah. You know from the beginning that Claude Rains is the guilty one, right? Yeah. Same with Rope, Those feel more noir to me than The Last of Sheila. It really is kind of a whodunit sort of thing. So I enjoy the movie. In fact, this kind of made me think about it a little more, and yeah, I should go back and find it someplace and watch it again, just because that cast is really fantastic. That's like a 70s who's who cast.
It is. I just have to say, there's something about your setup. You look very noir tonight. Just the way your lighting is and the black jacket. I don't know what it is. Usually you don't look that, like, I don't know. You look very mysterious tonight.
Well, okay. That's good, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry. Oh my gosh. So we've had a couple of requests for your opinion of the new Nightmare Alley. We did do you talked about briefly, and we had to cut it because it was before the press embargo was over. And then I put that clip up on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. But if you would like to say something.
Sure. I mean, that was very amusing because I think I had just seen the movie when we were doing one of these, and I talked about it and then realized that Fox Searchlight had specifically called me and said, you can't talk about the film before, its official review date, which was, this past week, right? It opened on the 17th of December, but I guess reviews started appearing a little bit earlier than that. Anyway, I very much enjoyed it. I thought it was very, very good. I think Del Toro was the right guy to make this movie. It was really fun to see Kim Morgan, billed as the co-screenwriter. Mm-hmm. And because, Kim is an old friend of mine and she has written for the Noir City magazine. And so, they clearly understood William Lindsay Gresham. And I my feeling when I watched the movie was that Gresham would really like this, their adaptation. It's more similar to the 47 film than a lot of talk about this version would have you believe. Mm-hmm. When they say we went back to the book to it's based on the book, not that movie, but it's very, very similar to the 47 film, only all the stuff you couldn't really do in 1947, you're able to do now. Mm-hmm. And so that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. And I thought the cast was terrific and the production design is fabulous and everything about it production-wise is great. But I also think the cast is terrific and the screenplay is really good. So I give it an enthusiastic thumbs up. And I think people should go see it because I'm very concerned that I was happy to see Fox Searchlight put so much effort into the promotion of the film. And, with a lot of social media stuff and a lot of advertising on television. And they did these beautiful subway ads in New York.
Yeah, I saw photos of those.
Yeah, but it didn't break from the gate very strongly, and people, they made the decision to release it in theaters only at the start, rather than the release streaming and in theaters simultaneously. And it's worth seeing on a big screen, definitely. And people should avail themselves of that because I don't want it to be like, oh, see, nobody wants to see film noir.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, Spider-Man, whatever it is, like the 27th or 28th iteration of Spider-Man out-earned everything else at the box office by 120 times.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it made 120 something million dollars in its opening and everything else made like $1.5 million.
Yeah.
So if people don't support these other movies that aren't superhero films, all that's going to be left in movie theaters is superhero films. That's kind of the way it's going. And I don't want that. So go see Nightmare Alley. And I'm not saying that because, my friend Kim co-wrote it. I'm saying it because it deserves to be seen in a movie theater.
And I just wanted to kind of bring us back around because I mentioned earlier that we had released like a short of your hot take from that. So this past week, so I also released one of our conversations about In a Lonely Place, which is up on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. So I just kind of want to let people know my ambition is to release more of those sort of short extracts of things I know people are really interested in on a regular basis.
That's great. That's great. Well, then I'll try to keep my answers somewhat shorter.
No,
I know I do this when TCM asks me to do something. They're like, And can you do a little something on this? And it's like, wow, on social media, when they say a little something, they mean like 10 seconds, you know.
Yeah.
And as people who know me know, I am not a sound bite kind of guy, you know.
Yeah.
I tend to give rather long and involved, long-winded answers to things. So
No. I mean, I think that just why I'm picking are things, that one I picked because, you know, it was Nightmare Alley. I wanted to get it out so people could get your opinion and hopefully go see the movie. But with the other ones, I'm just going to excerpt stuff where I think it's really interesting. It seems to be something that comes up a lot. So that In a Lonely Place clip was about 10 minutes.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
So just so you
it's
know.
funny because, you know, Anne, let's face it. I mean, we do this and we have a very old school approach to this.
Yeah.
And it's not quick hitting sound bites because my brain doesn't actually work that way. And I'm kind of a contrarian because I don't want it to be like, here's 10 seconds on this, and here's 15 seconds on that. And it's like, you know, we're just having a conversation. And I like to think that people imagine they're sitting around. I mean, obviously we're not interacting directly, but we're trying to fake it at least. So
Yeah, there you go.
okay, here is a question from Craig. It's a question request for the book. Craig says he has been a voracious reader of crime fiction and film noir writing since college. Although I've read much of Hammett Kane and W.R. Burnett, for some unknown reason, I've read very little of Cornell Woolridge's work.
Yeah.
I don't know what the unknown reason would be other than you haven't opened the books and read them. That's the reason. There's no other reason, right? Since you are both big proponents of Woolridge, will you please suggest a few of his novels and short stories, other than Rear Window? And Craig says, I don't really know much about Woolridge at all, other than he was apparently a very reclusive alcoholic for most of his life. True enough. And that he probably, during the classic noir era, had more movies made from his stories than probably any other writer, I would think.
And probably, go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
As again, probably more radio show adaptations too.
Absolutely.
I mean, there was an enormous amount of his stories that were adapted for the radio, especially for suspense. Did a lot of his stories.
Right. And have you seen the fabulous Alfred Hitchcock Presents one with E.G. Marshall? It's called either 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, where the guy is going to kill his wife with the bomb, and he gets locked in the basement of his house by the burglars. That's a pretty great episode. Yeah.
And it's a really great short story too.
It's a great short story and a great adaptation. And of course, one of the burglars was played by Harry Dean Stanton, an early role for Harry Dean Stanton. Do you have a particular novel or short story that you would suggest to Craig?
Gosh, it's hard to pick just one. But I would definitely say The Bride Wore Black, because I really like that one a lot. And oh gosh, what's the other one that's similar to The Bride Wore Black?
Rendezvous in Black.
Rendezvous in Black. Yeah. That's a really good story.
There is, Craig, go buy this book. This is a brand new edition of The Bride Wore Black from Otto Penzler, the great Otto Penzler. He has a whole series of these called American Mystery Classics. And this is The Bride Wore Black. And if you can see down here at the bottom, it says Introduction.
Oh, wow.
So obviously that is my choice for you as well. So there you go. Okay.
And this is from John in Maryland. As a big fan of Raymond Chandler's books and movies, I was excited to recently come across some recordings of Chandler being interviewed by Ian Fleming not long before Chandler died. It was thrilling to hear Chandler's voice. He was quite witty and probably a little drunk. Surprise. Have you ever heard these recordings?
Yes, I have. Have you heard these, Anne?
I have not.
Well, it's one that that was done. I think I'm pretty sure for the BBC. Philip French introduced it, and it was Fleming. There's a long story involved in the relationship between Ian Fleming and Raymond Chandler that I'm not going to go into right now, but I will say that it's actually a project that I'm working on involving this very thing. And yeah, Chandler was drunk, really drunk when they recorded that, and he pulled it together pretty well. Those were hard times for Chandler. After Sissy, his wife died, and he was sort of courted by the Brits for various reasons, and that's when he, Helga Green, who ended up getting control of the Chandler literary estate, was a British literary agent married to Graham Greene's brother. And anyway, it's a very interesting story, I hope. But yeah, that was. I think you can find those recordings on YouTube. If you just put type in Fleming Chandler interview or something like that, it'll come up. It's like 35 minutes or so, a radio interview that they did together in the 50s. And it's interesting, of course, because Chandler, it's sort of passing the torch, because Chandler, and Philip Marlowe was sort of the knight in tarnished armor, and then that image of the private eye would very quickly give way to the super spy that Ian Fleming virtually created with James Bond. So it is very interesting to hear those two guys in conversation. So that was John in Laytonsville, Maryland.
And you get the next one?
Oh, okay. Tyler is giving us a noir or not, GORK Park from 1983. Martin Cruz Smith. I know the book, but I'm going to be honest. I never saw the movie.
Oh,
I know
you've never seen it? Yeah.
No, Lee Marvin, right? It's one of Lee Marvin's last films, and I'm embarrassed to say one of Lee Marvin's last films, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of William Hurt's first films, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I have not seen the movie. I like Martin Cruz Smith's books. I think he's a really fine writer, but I've just never seen the film. What do you think of it?
I think of it as an espionage story, you know, and Lee Marvin's really great in it. I mean, he really is. He just made such an impression on me when I saw that film, and William Hurt's always good. But yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely worth watching. I should watch that. I haven't seen that since it played in the theater. That was when I saw it.
I don't know why that one went by me. I mean, it's funny. Sometimes if I read a book, I am not in any rush to see the movie.
Yeah.
So that one got by me. So, but I know what you're saying about espionage pictures. I have the hardest time trying to think of anything that involves spies and double agents and stuff like that. I tend to not see those as noir. It's like a different category of film to me.
No. Okay, so this is Lauren from Chicago. I was wondering if you could clear something up for me. I have read where many people consider Sunset Boulevard to be film noir. I do not. Sure, it begins with the murder told in flashback with ample narration early in the film, but after that, the film is a very open, bright, and in the sunlight. It is a great cinema classic, but not noir. It's really a story of how the Hollywood machinery grinds and splits how stars every decade or so when the actor is no longer profitable to a studio or industry. It is closer to The Bad and the Beautiful than, say, Double Indemnity. So, Eddie, how does Sunset Boulevard qualify as a true film noir?
I know what Lauren is suggesting here, but I disagree. The Bad and the Beautiful is is a multi-character drama about Hollywood that just happens to look like a film noir. Sunset Boulevard is much closer in the motivations of its characters to other noir films. I mean, I've always thought of it like, instead of being a detective who is put on retainer by an eccentric client, Joe Gillis is a writer who is put on retainer by an eccentric client. And she also happens to be the femme fatale of the piece, because, I mean, right? Joe is sort of seduced into this, just like he reminds me so much of Robert Mitchum in Out of the Past, in the sense that he thinks he can handle it. He thinks he's getting into something that he can handle, and then he realizes halfway through that he's in way over his head. Plus, the film also presents the very common dichotomy between the female characters of the alluring, unhinged femme fatale, Norma Desmond, and the Nancy Olsen character, who is the good, common sense, good woman that Joe really needs. And he's sort of torn between these two, because, and it's all about him having this desire to get what he craves, which to me is the essence of film noir, right? I mean, that's why they rob the banks. That's why they steal the money and Joe wants to be a success in Hollywood. He doesn't want to go back to his small town and admit that he was a failure. So he, quote unquote, takes a case that he thinks he is on top of, and then it ends up destroying him. And it's his, in many ways, he is self-destructive because he refuses to pull himself out of this. Well, he does, but it's too late. By the time he does at the end of the film, it's too late. And his shunning Norma is what ends up doing him in. So, I have no problem whatsoever seeing it as a noir story, because it's about all the same themes. It's about reckless ambition, it's about madness, it's about doing the wrong thing, knowing you're doing the wrong thing and doing it anyway because you think you can get away with it. And it makes it a very personal story. It puts it in very personal terms, like film noir does, unlike The Bad and the Beautiful or other Hollywood movies that aren't that dark and they aren't that grotesque the way Sunset Boulevard is. It's so that's why I've always thought of it as a noir film. In fact, and I also think that Billy Wilder was specifically alluding to that when he has Joe narrate the film as a dead man. It was like, I'm sure Billy Wilder felt that he had sort of started that trend with Double Indemnity. He wasn't really the first, but it was really great. So, and then he said, well, now watch what I do now. Watch what I do now, and so that's my take, for what it's worth.
Okay. You want to do 8?
Yeah. Oh, more from Doug in Silver Springs. Doug is like our official. Oh, look at you. You put these in order. So the first thing Doug says is, when Billy Wilder made Sunset Boulevard, he created a subgenre of noir I call Hollywood as Hell. My personal favorite of this subgenre is Richard Mulligan's Inside Daisy Clover, very loosely based on MGM's mistreatment of Judy Garland. Do you consider Inside Daisy Clover to be noir? And what do you think of Inside Daisy Clover? Anne, do you have any feelings about it?
No, I've never seen it.
Because you've never seen the film.
No.
I have seen the film a long time ago, and I have to say, that's the first time I've ever heard anybody refer to it as potentially being a noir. And I have a, you know, I'm going to say that to me, it's not a noir the way Sunset Boulevard is a noir. It's more like The Bad and the Beautiful or something like that. But Richard Mulligan is a really underrated director. I mean, obviously he made, you know, To Kill a Mockingbird, but other films that he's made, including the great neo noir The Nickel Ride. Uh, you know, he deserves a little more respect than he gets. But Doug, I'm not really feeling it for Inside Daisy Clover as a film noir. And then he also follows that up by saying James Bond films may not be noir, but what about the 60s films based on Len Deighton's book or his book starring Michael Caine as Harry Palmer, like he says Funeral in Berlin, but he also The Ipcress File obviously is another one. Do you consider those to be noir? We've kind of touched on this already, right?
Yeah.
What do you think, Ann?
I consider them spy films. I didn't consider it noir.
The Ipcress File certainly has a noirish look to it, but again, maybe what distinguishes noir for me is that the protagonists. I'm going to sound a little like my buddy Dennis Lehane now. The protagonists are kind of ordinary people, you know, who find out they're capable of doing extraordinary things that they never imagined they would do. Spy movies, by their very nature, those are people already trained to do extraordinary things, right? So they know going in that they're working for the government. Their challenges and their obligations are somewhat different. So even though you could very easily, you could make an argument that like John le Carré writes a type of noir story because it's about the difficulty, the psychological drama of being a spy, of being a double agent and all that. There is something noirish about it, but I tend to think of all those as totally separate from the everyman kind of story. You know, I just would never. You could put a James Bond film in all the trappings of film noir, and all you'd be doing is saying it looks like a film noir, because it isn't, because James Bond is just not a noir character. That's just the way I feel about it. So.
Okay, and this next one's from Liz. You've had several discussions about American film noir segueing into neo-noir beginning in the 1960s. Was there a comparable shift in Italy? I know a lot about Giallos, but not much about what preceded them. Were there any Italian films of the 40s and 50s you would consider noir, or do you see any stylistic parallels between neo-noirs and Giallos?
I do, but probably more than I see between like espionage and spy movies and noir. Yeah, definitely there were films made in the 40s and 50s. Well, I mean, in the 40s, not so much. I mean, Luchino Visconti did his version of The Postman Always Rings Twice. And that was pretty much it for noir in Italy during the war years. And it's a really great film. And if people haven't seen it, they should try to track it down. But as you may recall, Anne, at Noir City, when we did our international editions, we showed a terrific film called Four Ways Out from 1951 by, I think it was by Pietro Germi, and another film later on, The Facts of Murder, also by Pietro Germi, that were both very noir films, which I loved, both those movies. Federico Fellini actually co-wrote the screenplay for Four Ways Out, which is a heist picture, but a heist picture far more concerned with the aftermath of the heist, the motivations and aftermath of the heist, and the personal stories of the criminals than it was with the heist itself. And I showed Antonioni's story of a love affair, chronicle of a love affair, that is very much a noir, like a James M. Cain story, done very much in the Antonioni way. What that qualifies for what they called back then a white telephone movie. That's what they, which was like lifestyles of the rich and famous. Everybody had a white telephone, and that became like the symbolic icon in all these movies. But the Giallo films they're like noir thrillers with a lot more blood. I mean, that's like they're borderline horror movies. They're psychological thrillers veering into horror. And I don't remember the issue, but I know that Steve Cronenberg, I think, did a great article for the Noir City magazine about all of those. I'm drawing a blank on some of the directors right now, but Dario Argento, of course, before he became synonymous with horror, did a number of those Giallo films that were, which if people are unfamiliar with it, it's Italian for yellow, and for some reason, that's the term they use for these things, which is very interesting because in the French Série Noire, the literary noir canon or catalog or whatever that Gallimard, the French publisher, produced, they were all black and yellow. All the covers of all the books were black and yellow. And then when that made its way over to Italy, they adopted just the term giallo as for yellow to indicate the same kinds of stories, these berserk psychological thrillers. But in Italy, there's always been a tradition of horror right on the pushing up right against what would be a crime story. The bird with the crystal plumage and all this kind of stuff. Which is really, there's something there in the Italian culture that it like permeates that. It's funny because I noticed even my Italian poster back here for Tomorrow is Another Day, you can't really see it clearly, but there's blood dripping down from the body of Steve Cochran in this poster, and there's some obsession that the Italians had with like bloodletting in these films. So even when you see posters from Hollywood noir films from the 40s and 50s, they put blood on the posters. And to me, that was all kind of leading up to this whole Giallo thing in the late 60s and 70s. So, I see them as being related, but I don't automatically see them as a perfect corollary, but certainly related. Okay. Greg wants to know if The Money Trap, the 1965 movie by, come on, who made The Money Trap? It
Stones.
was, say what?
It wasn't a Virginia's.
It's not. No, it's not a Stones film. I thought you meant the Stones. I thought you meant like Mick and Keith.
Oh, I got it confused with.
I know what you're thinking of. The Steel Trap. You're thinking of The Steel Trap with Joseph Cotton and Teresa. Oh, it's a fantastic film. No, The Money Trap is. God, why am I drawing a blank on the director now? But it's Glenn Ford. It's Glenn Ford and Elke Summer and Rita Hayworth and Ricardo Montalban. It's a good film. We've shown it at Noir City. In fact, I showed it on a double bill with another Glenn Ford Rita Hayworth movie. It may have been Affair in Trinidad because it was like a reunion of them in the 1960s. Anyway, Greg's question was just, will it be available on Blu-ray anytime soon? I wish I had a pipeline, Greg, to tell you these things, but I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't understand why it hasn't been available yet. I mean, it's kind of star-studded, and it's a really good movie. And I want to say it was, God, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. This is a senior moment. It's like Burt Kennedy, maybe, or somebody like that, who directed that film. Wow, that's bad. Okay, we'll figure that out. I'm sure everybody watching on Facebook has now typed in who the actual director of that film is, but it's pretty good. But when it's going to be on Blu-ray, no idea.
And this is Joe from Niagara Falls, Canada. Lance Comfort, a relatively neglected British film director, arguably helmed more noir films than anyone, anywhere. I have viewed 12 films I contend are quite noir indeed, and there are at least 5 to 7 more that I've not been able to track down. Perhaps his greatest achievement is the Georges Simenon-based film Temptation Harbor, 1947. This would make a wonderful companion in Nightmare Alley. Unfortunately, not available. Any thoughts on how we can resolve this? It does, in fact, exist in a mint version with the BFI. Also, any thoughts on how one can see a good copy of Black Tuesday, from 1954?
Okay, Joe. Yeah, Lance Comfort is, he did make a lot of movies. The dilemma we have is it doesn't really make sense for the Film Noir Foundation to restore British films, because the BFI is in a position to do that. The BFI, the British Film Institute, are wonderful collaborators with us, but their charter, so to speak, when it comes to restoring films, is exclusively within the UK. So those are the films that they will fund the restoration of. If they have elements on a film that isn't British, they will gladly loan it to be the basis for a restoration. So we have gotten numerous films, actually, like Woman on the Run. The elements that we used to restore that film came from the British Film Institute. And our latest restoration, The Argyle Secrets, was also sourced at the British Film Institute. But we wouldn't go to them and say, hey, we want to restore this Lance Comfort picture, because that's their bailiwick, so to speak. And we could point it out to them and say, this is a film worthy of restoration. We would be supportive of this, or we would show it if you restored it. But we're not going to put up the money to restore it, because they can do that themselves. And thanks, Joe, for mentioning Black Tuesday, which is one of the great thorns in my side, because we are trying like hell to find a 35 millimeter print of that film, which I showed 20 something years ago at the Egyptian Theater in Los Angeles. And it's a really, really interesting film. And the Il Cinema Ritrovato Festival in Bologna, Italy is doing a Ugo Fregonese retrospective coming up in the summer of 2022. And Black Tuesday is a film that we're having a very hard time tracking down. So that's a dilemma, and we'll see. We'll see how that goes. We've only located 16 millimeter prints of it. Why? It was a United Artists picture, and I won't go into all the details of how people have heard me talk many, many times about how hard it is to, when film libraries are sold and move between different owners, sometimes films slip between the cracks, and I'm fearful that Black Tuesday is one of those. But that doesn't mean we're going to stop trying. So there you go. Okay. Arlene has a question. She says, I am half a Londoner. And since my mother died in 1997, have been obsessed with collecting noir films from the UK. Over the years, I've also become a nut about subtitles. I know they detract from the picture, but I like to read the script. Last week, Arlene discarded many PAL noir film DVDs because they have no subtitles. Why is it so hard to find English subtitled Blu-rays, excepting Hitchcock's, Wells, Powell Pressburger, etc., of British film noirs? Wow, that's an interesting question. Arlene, I wish I knew the answer, except that obviously, right, they're in English. So people don't think the films need subtitles. Although, how many times, Anne, when you're watching Brighton Rock or something, do you wish, man, this could use some subtitles?
Brighton Rock, I'm okay with. If it's a London accent, I'm fine with it. When it's hard for me is more northern accents for me are more of a challenge, and Liverpool especially. But
oh yeah,
that's a tough one. But I find just in when I'm watching stuff at home, especially modern films and television, because the way they sound mix, a lot of times I have to turn on the subtitles to be able to I'll miss stuff otherwise, and I don't necessarily want to blast my neighbors out with my sound system. Especially modern films, it's just that the way they're mixed, if you turn it up too much, then the action parts will be super loud. And then anyway, so
there was a very, did you see that very interesting story about that? I forget where it appeared, but in the last month or so, there was a story that I read. I found it on the internet, so I cannot recall, I'm sorry to say, the source, but it was about what's wrong with the sound in modern films in terms of deciphering dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people kind of laid the blame on Chris Nolan because his movies it's very hard to understand the dialogue. Like in what was the Dunkirk? Like in Dunkirk, I was going to say 1917. That's not him.
Yeah.
But in Dunkirk, and I haven't seen Tenet, but people said it was really hard. The one I had an impossible time with was Gosford Park. Right? The Robert Altman film. It's like, I can't understand what anybody is saying in this movie. And anyway, that article had some really interesting observations from sound people who did it professionally as to why it's become harder and harder to record audible sound to begin with. And then given all of the incredible technology we have, why is it hard to understand? And anyway, I feel for you, Arlene, but my deal with subtitles these days, when I show a subtitled movie on Noir Alley, there's always a percentage of the audience that pushes back because they don't want to read the movie, and I get all these things saying, people saying, if I wanted to read, I'd read a book. Why do I have to read while I'm watching the movie? And I just, I will never show a dubbed film because it's atrocious. I don't like dubbing a movie. It is just stupid to me. If you have to hear it in the original language even if you don't think you're getting the subtleties, you are getting the subtleties, just allowing yourself to absorb the language, even if you're reading along with it. So the only thing I can say, Arlene, to answer your question is because it costs money. I mean, it costs money to subtitle a film. And if you're making it a Blu-ray or something for an English-speaking market and it's in English, you're going to save a little money by not subtitling it. Right? Although, what the hell? I mean, when we do our movies through Flickr Alley, they're not considered subtitled, but they are closed captioned, right? I mean, all the movies we put out are closed captioned for the people who are hearing impaired, and it's the same as having subtitles, right? So try that, Arlene. If you don't know that you can turn on closed caption, it doesn't give you maybe the option to choose subtitles, but it should give you the option to choose closed captioning. And maybe that'll solve the issue for you. All right.
Yeah. And you'd think they would do that for classics. I mean, just because a lot of the audience skews older. So it just makes sense if you're putting out classics to have a closed caption track.
Well, I have to say, I got that when my mom, was in assisted living and stuff. There would be a television on that several people were watching or something, or if somebody was watching something and somebody wanted to watch something else, they could, rather than have the competition between the sound, you can watch it with the closed caption and just read it and follow along with what's going on, which a lot of people do in those situations, which is good,
Okay, and this one's from Dan. Do you think Julie, 1956, is a good name for a movie?
No, I don't think Julie is a good name for a movie. However, I think Julia is a great name for a movie. No, just kidding. That's such a funny question. A good name for a movie. Not particularly. I mean, this movie, Anne. If you wanted to retitle it, I mean, it would. I don't know what could we retitle Julie? The Reluctant Pilot.
Or Danger at Whatever Feet. Yeah, I mean, because the thing is, I mean, in a way, it's really, it's kind of a funny question. Like, I laughed when I read it, but at the same time, it's a good point because that film is so intense, and just calling it Julie is just sort of like, I mean, it's a very intense movie. Like, I found, I thought it did. Because it starts out really it's about an abusive relationship. I mean, it's not just terror in the sky for no reason. It's her husband, trying to kill her. And,
and the bit in the sky is only the last, 20 minutes or something.
Yeah. I mean, because there's this whole thing where he's stalking her and, it's really a good movie. And it needed a better title, I have to say.
But I'm curious if they just did that because they wanted to get the Doris Day fans who might not have wanted to see a scary thriller. Mm-hmm. So let's just call it Julie. And then they'll think, she's going to sing a bunch of songs and whatever. But anyway, I'm a huge Doris Day fan. So I like that movie. Yeah. Goofy as it is at times, I like that movie. That is the Stones that you mentioned earlier. That one is made by the Stones. Yeah.
And I thought it was because I thought they did the domestic violence stuff really well on that. And that idea, people are like, well, why doesn't she just leave? And it's like, it's not like you just leave and everything's fucking solved. Pardon my French. These guys have been known to frequently hunt their wives down and kill them. It's, it doesn't just end there.
Yeah. So. And isn't it interesting that it was Louis Jourdan was the bad guy, much like Charles Boyer was the bad guy in Gaslight, It's like, it's so similar in so many ways, but anyway.
Except he's really bonkers, I mean, that's the thing about it too, is, I mean, he's more, I mean, it's because Boyer's thing, he's more sort of sociopathic, and he, married her specifically for this scheme, whereas Jourdan was just like possessive of her.
Just
and
nuts. Yeah.
Nuts. Yeah.
And that was the, well, I won't get into it, but yes, I am a Doris Day fan, and I like that movie very much. So
She's really good in it. I really like Doris Day too, by the way.
Doris Day is good. I mean, she's good in a lot of things. Much better actress than she was ever given credit for.
Absolutely.
And you know, those 60s movies, you know, as Oscar Levant said, you know, I knew her before she was a virgin.
Yeah.
You know, and then once, you know, the 60s movies I'm not as big a fan of, you know, but the stuff from the 50s is just incredible.
Yeah.
So, you know what I saw the other night? This is totally off subject, but I watched this because it's finally back available and you can watch it. Is one of the strangest musicals ever is the Pajama Game with Doris Day. Have you ever seen the Pajama Game?
You know, I've never actually seen it. I know of it because it was a very famous Broadway musical before they.
Very famous,
no, I
and
have
it's
seen it.
famous.
I take that back. I have seen it.
Yeah, famous because of Bob Fosse's choreography. And a couple of classic, you know, the Steam Heat number that Doris Day is not in. That's Carol Haney is the dancer in that. And Hernando's Hideaway, famous number in the film. But that movie is incredibly bizarre. I mean, a musical about unionization in a pajama manufacturing company and battling for a 7.5-cent raise, you know, and it is like the most politicized musical you could possibly imagine. But parts of it are just so dopey, and then parts of it are so serious. It's like this is like a Marxist musical or something. I mean, that movie is incredible, just incredible to me. Anyway, that's off the track. Okay, what's our? Oh, this is my question now. Oh,
Yes.
look, it's from our pal Michael in Post Falls, Idaho.
Yeah.
Michael and Doug and Lauren are all like vying for the most questions asked title. Okay, but here is Michael's question. How does Eddie verify the pronunciation of actors, directors, writers, etc., for the films he introduces at Noir City or on Noir Alley, especially now that he is showing more movies not in English? That's what friends are for, Michael. If I have not verified it myself, I will. When it's the names of people, I just call people that I know who can tell me the correct pronunciation. So, like with French names and things, that's, you know, I have a lot of French friends, so that's not too difficult. Otherwise, you know, I ask people, or I study online or something, or I research it. It gets a little tricky when I try to pretend like I know the language. Like on Noir Alley, I'll sometimes do sign-offs in a foreign language if I'm showing something in Japanese or something. And I was very gratified. I showed Cruel Gun Story and did a sign-off where I can't remember what it is, but I said, see you in the shadows in Japanese. And I was very pleased to get a note from a Japanese woman who said, that was fantastic. You know, that you were spot on. You know?
Right.
So it was like, okay, that was good. But I mean, I've loused other ones up that I know, but you know, you do your homework like everything else, Michael. That's how that's done. And if you are going to mess up, at least when I'm at TCM, I have a crew and you know, that are there who can look stuff up online, because once in a while you do run into a pronunciation that is off. You know, it's interesting. You know, just this last week I was doing the audiobook version of Dark City, and you know, I was in the recording studio for an entire week reading this and realize, you know, and I came up like 5 or 6 times against pronunciations that I thought were correct, and I was told, no, that's actually not the way it's pronounced. And then other times it was like I was pronouncing it and I was told I was doing it wrong. And I said, no, I insist this is the correct pronunciation. And and I was correct, you know, but it's kind of interesting, you know, like I was told at one point that it's Mitchell Leeson, and then it's not, it's Mitchell Lyson. And I'm going to let Robert Osborne be the authority on that, because he, you know, I found footage of him talking about Remember the Night and saying it's directed by Mitchell Lyson, even though I had been told by more than a few people that it was Mitchell Leeson. So anyway, you have to just do your homework. Okay. Oh no, it's your question now.
Yes. Actually, I do have a question for you. This is for me. Because you said you were recording your audio book,
Yes.
you know, of Dark City. Are you at the point now where you're tired of the book? Like, you know, because I know you had to go back and, you know, you did a lot of new writing for it and stuff like that. And now you're like reading it. I'm just wondering, is there at some point where you're just like, you don't want to think about your own book anymore?
No, that hasn't happened, because I have to tell you, it was recording it as an audiobook was a very interesting experience, because I tend to write for the page, and even though I try to write with a voice, and like you can imagine this being spoken, it's very different when you get in a studio and actually have to read it, or not just read it but perform it. And it everything, it changes, you know.
Yeah.
And so in many ways, the timing of your question is interesting, because if you had asked me that question a month ago, I would say, yeah, maybe a little bit. But now, no, because it was like experiencing the book in a whole new way, having to read it, and like, how do I really want to emphasize this? And it's also interesting that a different quality comes out when you're voicing it than when you're just reading it on the page, because you know, you can't help but give emphasis or put a little more of something into it or leave it out. Like, you know, if I'm making a point rather strongly on the page, you don't have to emphasize it in the way you're saying it. Just you can withdraw rather than emphasize. Conversely, if it's just passage work, maybe you need to give it a little something, a little more juice to make it play a little better. But no, I'm not, I can't say I'm tired of it. Because I was making something new out of it in this instance. So that was intriguing. So that's, okay.
Okay, so I think it's me now, right?
Okay.
2 questions from John Weber in Tampa. Oops, John in Tampa. I usually leave off people's last names. So the first question is, what is the biggest lost film noir you'd love to find? Your own holy grail.
Oh my goodness. Well, you know, I've answered this a few times by saying I don't know what that film is yet, because I'm sure it's a film I have yet to discover. Like if you had asked me 10 years ago, what's your holy grail? You know, at one point I would have said Woman on the Run. At another point I would have said Too Late for Tears. And then once we restored those, I started saying, well, I don't know what the film is yet. And then I learned about Los Tallos Amargos, and then I learned about The Beast Must Die. And so in many ways, I feel like it's a film that I haven't encountered yet. But, you know, of the ones that we are aware of, you know, I've always had this superstition, as you well know, Anne, that I don't like to talk about it. Once it becomes a possibility, I don't really want to talk about it because I think it jinxes it. Or I don't necessarily like people to know what we're doing. Which is odd because here all these people are donating to the foundation, which is hugely appreciated, but yet I can't help it. My very noirish sensibility tells me that if I say, well, we're looking for this, then if somebody has it, they're going to like hold it hostage, and say, well, I got it. Here it is. If you want to pay me, blah, 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 and I just as soon like come in the back door and find it and say, huh, interesting, and like not let people know that I'm looking for it so diligently. So there are 3 or 4 of those films that I'm after right now. And I have my leads and my way of doing this, but I don't want to like publicly say this is what I'm looking for because it could be great. Somebody could just come out of the woodwork and say, I've got it. Fantastic. Here it is. Conversely, somebody could say, let's make them pay for it, through the nose. So that's why that's kind of tricky. Anyway.
Okay, now to preface the question that you were about to read, I really had to trim this down, but if you can figure out how to trim it down more when you're reading it, it would be appreciated.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, yeah, I saw this and it was like, wow, this is amazing. Okay, Andrew, we're talking about you. Okay, Andrew sent a thesis about Body Heat, the movie Body Heat. And essentially the basis of this thesis was he disagrees with the notion that Maddie Walker, the Kathleen Turner character, gets away with it at the end. He doesn't think that's the case. And he says if the movie had an additional 30 minutes, you'd see Maddie's downfall. And then he proceeds to explain why he thinks that. Okay? I will just read this one part. My opinion is probably influenced by the fact that my favorite part of noir films is the downfall, which we didn't get for Maddie. I may be attributing qualities to Oscar. That's another character in the film.
Yeah, and that's the detective friend that William Hurt shows the yearbook photo too. Correct.
Because of my steady consumption of true crime and shows that have dogged detectives that never let that one case go, no matter how long it takes to resolve. Well, this is kind of interesting. So basically, he's saying she's not going to get away with it. And Andrew, I think you are obsessed with this. And what's interesting to me about it is I know for a fact that Lawrence Kasdan specifically wrote this screenplay to have her get away with it because that never could have happened in older films. But now that the production code was no longer in force, just like The Last Seduction, which does kind of the same thing, you can write a movie in which the femme fatale actually gets away with it. So it's kind of interesting to see this very detailed thing that Andrew does here, explaining why she's not going to get away with it. And it's also funny because he says she doesn't seem happy at the end of the movie. Well, I don't necessarily think that criminals who get away with it act happily when they do. They're, she's gotten away with it, but
And I did one of the points that Andrew brought up that I really liked, though, was that idea, though, of that she's going to want to do it again, and her having dissatisfaction around that, which I know, and that actually spoke to, and he pointed out, and it's true, this is something you see with actual real criminals, especially people that are sociopathic.
Yeah.
Is that there is a buzz off of doing this thing. And I thought that was the best theory, that she would just simply do something like this a second time. And that's really why she.
Well, yes, but also you do have to allow writers to end their stories when they choose to end them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you want to go on and say she got caught again, trying this again later, well, fine. That's your story to write.
Right.
But Lawrence Kasdan's story to write was that she got away with it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's kind of, in some respects, you have to accept that the story ends when the writer chooses to end the story, right?
Yeah.
And maybe there are clues or something, but I don't think in any way that Lawrence Kasdan was saying, I'm going to put clues in here suggesting that she's going to be caught. It's imminent that she is going to be caught. I don't think that's actually in the movie.
No.
So anyway, okay. And here's our last one for this episode.
Okay.
In a prior episode, you were asked about the prevalence of smoking in film noir. In response, you said simply, did I really say it simply? Because I don't generally do that.
Yeah.
That smoking in these films was an addiction akin to addiction to digital devices today. Well, yeah, I do agree with that. To me, smoking in noir is more than that. There are important rituals involved. Well, yes, of course.
Yes.
Okay, and then Dick from San Francisco goes on to cite a New York Times article about the use of cigarettes in films to pose, to control, to share, to play for time in an awkward situation. Yes. And he says, for me, smoking in noirs and other films can be a meaningful, integral element of a scene. Of course. Imagine, for example, the memorable scene in Now Voyager without the two cigarettes. Well, yeah, much would be lost. True enough. Yeah, so I think what perhaps Dick in San Francisco misinterpreted what I was saying here. I mean, I'm sure I mentioned in that previous answer that a cigarette is an actor's, nice work, Emily, that a cigarette is an actor's best friend. I mean,
someone can just use their leg.
There you go. Yeah, nice. Because it's the greatest prop an actor can have, because they can do so much with it, right? It expresses nervousness. Think of Crime Wave, the broken cigarette that Sterling Hayden has because he can't smoke. Yeah. So I'm not disagreeing with any of that. My observation, which I totally stand by, is that cigarettes were so ubiquitous in American life, in life in general at that time, that it was an easily accessible prop because everybody smoked, right?
Yeah.
And where cigarettes are so fantastic because you can do so much with them. And I truly think that most kids start smoking for that reason. It's not because they have a sudden compulsion to fill their lungs with smoke. It's that they want to look cool doing something with a cigarette, right? Because come on, stopping to light a cigarette, all this stuff, you learn it all from the movies. And but today, what's totally ubiquitous in life is the cell phone. And if you walk in, when you walked into a restaurant or something 70 years ago, everybody was smoking. Now everybody is on their phone. And the point I was trying to make here earlier was that So when they make a film about this era,
Yeah.
it won't look accurate unless everybody is on their phone.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, if I live another 30 years and somebody makes a movie about 2015 or something, I don't know why they'd want to relive this whole era, but if they did, and if everybody wasn't on their phone just like this is the look you're going to have from everybody. Right? That's it. That every place I go, that's what I see. Right? On the street and everything. So the cell phone has replaced the cigarette as the ubiquitous thing that people are doing all the time. That's what I was saying. But I agree with Dick completely. I mean, cigarettes are the greatest. And so let me ask you this, Anne. So when you watch a movie, and I know you watch a lot of European films where smoking, cigarette smokers aren't the pariahs they are in American movies today. But do you find it distracting when people are smoking in movies now? Or do you just take it for granted?
I mean, I think when I'm watching like something Danish, it doesn't, like, I don't think twice about someone smoking, because I think they just smoke more there. I may not be right about that, but it sure seems like it. So to me, it's just very, and also I smoke, so it's very natural to me. I think more like now it's more when I watch like an old film and they're like smoking in a bar, and I'm like, why can't I just have a cigarette in a bar? I mean, I'm killing myself with the alcohol. Why can I not have a cigarette? So now I think I have more of it. Just like when I see that, I just like gotta remember when I can smoke in a bar kind of feeling.
Yeah, you didn't have to go outside in the cold to have a cigarette, But it's interesting because I find to me, it's sometimes distracting in a modern film when I can tell that the actor doesn't actually smoke.
Yeah.
It's like, they should not have had this character be a smoker because they do not know what they're doing with the cigarette. It's just like they never had a clue as to how to do it. And I don't want to get off on this because I know we'll deal with it in another installment, but I think it was Michael, in fact, in Post Falls, Idaho, who asked about Goliath, the TV show Goliath, which I did watch the first season of on his recommendation. And Billy Bob Thornton is a really good smoker. I mean, he smokes constantly in that show, and you can tell that this guy can smoke.
Yeah.
And the cigarette was extremely well used in that. Yeah. And I don't think anybody else in the show smoked.
Yeah.
And so it really stood out, and it really worked very well for his character. Yeah. Anyway, we'll talk about Goliath in a later installment. So, okay. So it's going to be a new year. The next time we convene will be a new year.
Yes.
I hope everyone had a happy and healthy and safe holiday. And I know you are jumping off this to go make a trip yourself tonight. Yes. So I'm just going to wind up really quick. Besides the fact that I'm freezing and I'm like in a winter wonderland here, I'm gonna get off the line here so you can get your bags packed and get on the way. So safe travels, my dear.
Thank you very much, and I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday. And we will see you in the new year.
Very good. Happy New Year, everybody.